Ahoy Captain, and welcome to the tool tutorial of the Compliance Cost Calculator. In this video we will show you how you can use this tool to make compliance assessment in terms of costs, not just for your ship but also for voyages, especially interesting for charterers, and also how to, for example, make lifetime extension choices based on the compliance cost of your vessel. Not just one, but up to 2 vessels could be compared using this calculator. Before we start, a few disclaimers, because this tool itself is of course an estimate. It is a very good estimate in some cases, but very much depends on your input as well, not just with regards to the ship, but also the fuels, E-values for biofuels if needed, prices, etc, etc. So please note that this estimate does not have to be a perfect representation of your ship, and if you need any help with your ship specifically, you need to contact us. It is ship type dependent, and that we will show you of course, because all the regulations are dependent on the ship type that you put in. You can play around with it a bit, but be mindful that of course the ship type as we define them could be slightly differently defined by you, regulations, some regulations, or class. So be very careful of course when inputting different kinds of ship inputs. It is very much subject to change, not just the regulations and of course their cost impact, but also the ship information that we provide and what we show you in the tool. We're constantly updating everything according to your feedback. And then finally, like I said, it is an estimate, but we do provide verification services through our preferred partner Normek Verifavia. If you need some things to be verified, for example for different charterers, voyages, etc., we can offer that on a case-by-case basis. All you have to do is simply contact the help desk to make your life easier, schedule a call and see how we can help you with either verification services or anything else that you might need. Without further ado, let's dive into the tool itself. Here she is, or at least the web tool. We will show you both the web tool and the Excel model. If you are only interested in the Excel model, skip ahead to the fun parts. This web tool itself is based on or is located on the membership page. It is the premium compliance cost calculator, so some features are not available for the freemium version. If you're using that one, don't hesitate to become a member, of course. So we start off first with the fact that we do this on a ship-based approach. Here we have preloaded several available ships. We're gonna of course add more ships where applicable, and also for members we can load their fleet specifically so that I have information on their ships. First we're gonna choose a vessel. We can choose anyone we want. We're just gonna go for the Torl Knudsen, a tanker. Once we've selected it, there we go, we can press calculate compliance. Of course you can also search this table. For example, if we have inputted a lot of different ships and vessels, then here you can select ships to your liking and or specification. We're just gonna go for the regular tanker at the moment. There we go. And what do we see? Well, first of all, of course, the costs per year for, in this case, EU ETS and FuelEU. We can include fuel costs if we want. Generally speaking, we leave it out. But if you want to make different assessments, well, of course, fuel costs are very important, especially when you have biofuels or RFNBOs. What else do we have? We have a summary here, and we can change the end of life of the ship. More on that later. We can also choose to show the decarbonization trajectory of several different key regulations. Energy majors, ports, shipping companies are also included in the model itself. And there you can see what the decarbonization timeline expected would be for, until the end of life of your particular ship that you can choose here. We also have print report and compare scenarios. We'll do that afterwards. First we're going to go through the tool itself and I'll show you what is what. So we can choose to customize the ship and voyage, prices, fuel properties, key regulations, that includes EU ETS, FuelEU, CI and EEXI where applicable, and also all regulations that we have identified, and you can filter them out to see which one would affect your voyage or ship. So let's simply go from top to bottom. So we've chosen the tanker Torl Knudsen. As I said in the disclaimers, we can choose to change the ship category here, and how it will affect the analysis is as follows. The model itself looks at ship category to determine whether or not a specific regulation applies. If we change the category, the rules change, but everything else, so GT, fuel, etc., that will not be changed. So this is simply to make sure that, for example, if you have, let's say, a combination, well, a bulk carrier, perhaps according to your classifications, it's a combination carrier or etc., or you can simply use it to see how it would affect the different exposure. For example, if we have a dredging vessel, then EU ETS does not apply for the foreseeable future, or at least not according to the specs. So here we can play around and see how ship type can impact exposure. We're going to leave it at tanker for now. GT, same applies. Above 5,000 GTs, more regulations apply. Below, it's a different story. We can also choose to add shore power and wind power. That's particularly interesting for FuelEU, but I'll use that in the comparison cases, because then we can compare the impact of those different aspects. And then finally, here we have the fuel amount per year, so we can choose between different kinds of fuels. We have main fuel, auxiliary fuel, and a tertiary fuel that you can use to blend or whatever. So this is simply an estimate. Again, for members, we can input their fuel usage exactly for their specific ships, so that makes it easier. But here we can see, for example, what if we have not 14,000 but 15,000 metric tons of fuel. We can see how that impacts the pricing. What if we only use MDO, etc., etc. So here we can customize everything. We've also added the total amount of energy, because that's not useful only for shore power. If we're going to blend something with biodiesel, for example, what if we have 1,600 metric tons of biodiesel, then we see that we still need a little bit more to compensate for all the auxiliary fuel that we have used up. But we directly see the impact on, for example, FuelEU, and that we have no penalty until 2035, which is nice. We can also customize the voyage, a very important aspect, because EU ETS and FuelEU, of course, only apply to EU voyages. So inter-EU is 100% inside EU, 100% EU ETS and FuelEU. Intra-EU, that is 50%. That's from and to EU waters, so 50% costs FuelEU and EU ETS are taken into account. And the rest is, of course, everything outside, no EU ETS and FuelEU, and only fuel is incorporated. So this, for example, would be in the case when we sail from and to the EU, and then we need to either customize or determine the costs for this specific voyage. It's a nice tool to use if you want to determine the cost, the compliance cost for a charter that you want to. So that is all customizable here. Then for prices, we leave a few options here in the web tool. You can of course customize all the different fuels, etc. in the Excel model. First of all, we provide a few different scenarios that you can use in order to see how different, futures would impact your compliance cost. If we don't include a fuel, then of course, well, you're not going to see the impact of those fuels. But here you can see that we have a steady state, everything is constant. A fossil future, fossil will become cheaper over time. Biofuels will become cheaper over time, and renewables will become cheaper over time. So it depends on, what kind of future you want to analyze, and then you can change the trends here. What we do is we simply provide a base price for 2025, for example, HFO. Let's make it 800. There we go. Oh, we didn't use HFO, so let's change that back to HFO. There we go. And then we can change the trend. So does it do the prices go down or do the prices go up over time? And then we can see an average price here over time. And that's how you can quickly estimate the effect of price rises and of course lowering for different kinds of fuel, including EU ETS. Mind you, what we project here is the EU ETS price in dollars with an exchange rate here that can also significantly impact, of course, your analysis. But that is it with regards to all the prices. So you input your ship and voyage, your prices, and then basically most of it is done. What we have here is an option to change fuel parameters. We can do it for FuelEU and for EU ETS. So what we do in our backend is we adjust all the calculations as per the latest regulations. So you should have an indication of the latest regulation. However, some things of course change over time. For example, especially FuelEU, the RFNBOs, a lot of that information is not yet known. What we provide is best estimate based on what we know from the market and suppliers. But here, for example, if we have ethanol or biofuels in general, the E value is very important. The E value is the value that's stated on your proof of sustainability, and you can input it here, and you can, or you will see that it will greatly impact the analysis. For example, let me just show you real quick. If we have biodiesel 1600, then we see that we have no additional penalties until 2035. But if we have biodiesel 12, so that's 12.04 E value, which is like the golden standard, so used cooking oil. What if it becomes 30? Then we'll see that we already start paying penalty well in advance, so 5 years in advance. I'm just showing this to you because you cannot only customize everything here in the web tool, also in the model, but these values will significantly impact your analysis. So it's very good to understand all the fuel properties of your fuel. One more thing to note, if you're using LNG, here we can include C-slip of LNG, which will also impact the totals, which is very important. The global warming potential for methane and N2O is inputted here. Those also change, but we simply take the latest values of the IPCC. Then key regulations. Like I said, here we see the EU ETS, FuelEU, CI and EEXI applicability. If we play around with, for example, I just showed you dredging, then only FuelEU would apply to this particular case, but it all of course depends on how your ship is classified. So we're going to leave it at tanker, because then I can show you everything, because all the boxes are ticked. We have a calculation of EU ETS compliance cost per year, and of course a link to our EU ETS site where you can download the guide, find more information, specific tools, etc. And that applies to all the different regulations as well. FuelEU Maritime, same stuff. Here we also calculate CII as per the information you provide. Well, as you can see here in the calculations, it's not always simplified to the most extent, but these are simply used because, well, these are the input parameters that you have to provide yourself for these calculations as well. Same applies to EEXI. We quickly estimate the EEXI, but some values could be different for your case, of course. These are simplified calculations, but do provide you with a very good, quick and dirty estimates on whether or not you comply. And then finally, we also have all the regulations. As you can see here, a very extensive list of everything that we have identified so far. What we do is we can select either different regions, we can leave out governments, we can leave out all IMO options, we can include energy majors, let's see, so that we only have a look at the energy majors, shipping companies and or ports. So here you can sort of pick and choose which regulations apply to you. And of course, if we want to, let's see, what does Shell do nowadays, then we can, this is the latest that we have from Shell, so you can always find some more information neatly stacked together. And as always, simply reach out to us, contact the help desk if you need any help at all for further clarifications. So this is the general overview of the tool. Then I want to show you two more things. That is, of course, printing report and comparing scenarios. Especially comparing scenarios, that is a nice one. I like it in particular because you can compare the different compliance options, or different options on your compliance costs. Let me just show you. If we go to compare scenarios, then we have a case 1 and a case 2, or the business as usual and the comparison case. So I'm going to leave business as usual as it is. And here in comparison case, we can again choose between the different options. Let's see if we can also choose decarbonization trajectory. So what if, for example, we have, we're going to leave the left side the same as it is. But what if we have a lifetime extension of, or looking for a lifetime extension of 5 years, then we can see, 78, that's already quite a drastic increase in the amount of decarbonization that we need. And in terms of costs, let's see, oh boy, 3, this is a lot. Well, let's keep fuel out. So, okay. So here we see, for example, that between 2040 and 2045, we have almost 75 million in terms of compliance costs with the input parameters that we have. Oh boy. So that will be the cost for extending the vessel for another 5 years. Perhaps it's easier to, invest in a new build or make other choices with respect to that vessel. Again, if we go to decarbonization options, we can include different decarbonization trajectories in order to get an estimate of the different amount of CO2 reduction required. That does not impact the costs, of course. The same applies to ship and voyage. Here you can see that everything that we had for case 1 can be inputted for case 2. And we can change the different fuel amounts, etc. So for example, if we have our base case was 0 here and 1600 here, easier to compare, then we can see, okay, so we have more or less costs and or penalties, but how do those differ with respect to one another? And here, that's also what I wanted to show you. We can, for example, say, what if we have instead of MDO shore power, so we have 66 million metric tons of megajoules of shore power each year. I'm going to change this back to 2040. There we can see directly the impact of the use of shore power on the business case. Let's see, 2040 and 2040 and 2040. So leave it. There we go. So if we install shore power, we'll be mostly compliant until 2035. So that's going to save us 28 million euros in terms of cost. That's nice. And the same applies, of course, to, let's see, wind power. If we also include wind power, almost 13 million. That's only for installed wind power. That's excluding, by the way, any main fuel that you, of course, reduce. This is purely a compliance cost. So that's, well, very interesting to see, and we can use this to quickly compare different scenarios and then, okay, what if, blah, blah, blah. So we can even do 2 different ships if you want to compare different ships, but I'd say that's a bit tricky because there are so many differences. But, well, the same ship for different voyages or 2 different ships could both be analyzed. Then moving on to prices, stays the same. Fuel properties, everything stays the same. Only for key regulations, of course, we're going to have an additional column for the comparison case. And there you can simply see, okay, so it's going to save me this much the first year and almost that much then. Okay, yeah, cool. Also, the calculations with respect to CEI and EXI are then included. There's one more feature of the web tool itself that we can show you, and that is of course the printing report. We get a different reports for a single and a compare scenario, and we're well, improving the reports to make sure that you get the information you need. But if we click on print report, then we get a PDF of all the information that you have inputted. It can take a few seconds. I'm an impatient man myself, so I don't like it either, but that's just simply the way it is. Here we have the different cases, fuel, ship, voyage, prices. Well, we can include basically everything that you want in this print report, because it's a very useful way to quickly estimate, print a report, and then go to either C-level or colleagues with analysis and investment decisions. It's all included in the web tool. Nothing else to say here. Let's go to the Excel model to show you how the calculations are done. And here's the premium model. A few disclaimers before we start. Always disclaimers. Now, it's a beautiful model and you can use it for a lot of things, but it's, well, just like any other model, all models are false and some are very useful. And we find this one very useful for calculating a lot of things, but remind you, your case can and will be different. All ships are unique, so make sure to input your input correctly and always contact us if you have need for any clarifications at all. So we advise to make a copy of the Excel sheet itself before you override any changes. Verification services, if needed, are available, so contact us for a case-by-case basis and verification analysis. FuelEU penalty multiplier and pooling is excluded from this analysis. It's a single ship or two ships on a single ship basis. Only COPEX, well, that's nice. Only OPEX is included. We don't include any CAPEX at all. All the calculations themselves are done in euros, but all the input and the output is in dollars, except for some EU regulatory input. And anything hidden, you'll see some grouping and some probably hidden cells from time to time. That's not because we want to hide something from you. That's simply because we want to make it simpler so we have a better overview and you can expand, unfold where you want. So we're gonna first go through the entire sheet itself to give you a bird's eye overview of what we have done. First we have the input. Well, that's the input, but we also included the key total costs output, so you can change around and see how that impacts the totals with general input, and then case 1 and case 2, either a ship or the case itself. Then we have the output, so for each year the different costs component. We also include VLSFO costs if needed. Then we have all the calculations for case 1 and case 2. Yeah, that's it. We can expand quite a few, but basically we calculate all the different costs element, etc. In these different cells. We have the EEXI calculations and CII calculations for the two different cases. We also have all the regulatory data, so these are all the different regulations that we have identified with key impact and whether or not they apply to your ship. Mind you, this is only for case 1. So we assume you use the same ship but then different scenarios. If you have a comparison for case 2, that will not be shown here. Then we have a selection of ship data just to get you started. Of course, you are always free to override it. The fuel data, this is the fuel data we use. Also here you can override the information. Prices that you can also override, of course, from 2025 until 2050, but we, well, folded here to make it easier. The decarbonization trajectories from, let's see, 2025 until 2060, and if we zoom in we see all the different identified organizations that have a decarbonization trajectory or not. And finally, of course, a few of the references that we have used. And we do advise you to go through the Excel itself from left to right, even though input and output should be mostly important for you if you're interested in the analysis alone. Calculations could also be very interesting if you want to copy the way we do these calculations for your own internal analysis. So let's start with input first and guide you through it. Zooming in, we have all the different items for our general, all the different cases input. So we have the area that we operate in, global warming potential, the general costs of EU ETS, so the European allowance. I'll show you in prices how that's done. The exchange rate, same applies here. That's the base case or the base price that was used for other analysis. And the same applies to the C-slip. And if you have a careful look, we use named ranges. So we give these parameters names so that we can use the names in our calculations as opposed to referring to that cell. So if you go to formulas, name manager, then you can see all the different inputs that we have used. And basically we do this to more easily do all the calculations both in the back end and the front end. Contact us if you need any help for clarifications. And this we've already shown you in the web tool itself. If we zoom out, we can simply pick and choose of the different between the different ships that are available, or we can override the information where needed, so you can input your own vessel. If you do it, however, you can see that we use a VLOOK to the ship database here that matches the name of the ship and it looks for ship category. That's how we do it at the moment. So if you break stuff, at least the links, then of course next time you change it, it won't be changed automatically. That's fine. That's why we say use a copy, just in case. GT, everything else here is the same. We simply take it all from the database and you can see the named ranges that we use here. And well, basically only thing that's really important in this analysis is of course the input in terms of fuel and voyage. That should also speak for itself. We've added some tooltips where applicable, and also speaking about applicability, we make generalized assumptions on whether or not the different key regulations like EU ETS in this example is applicable or not. So we simply have a look at the ship category, see whether or not the GT applies. In this case there is a little bit of delay because GT higher than 400 is only after 2027. Still, we've taken the liberty of making some assumptions, and you can see how we determine applicability here. The same applies to FuelEU and CI and EEXI. So we can simply change or at least override whether or not we want to use that key regulation in our calculations. And then finally here we can determine whether or not to leave them out entirely. So we calculate, well, this is an output table, so not really an input, but at least it helps when we change stuff to see the totals changing. Otherwise, well, we're constantly clicking from input to output. So this is linking to the different output cells that I'm gonna show you now. Here we have the output for each case. I'm not going to show you every different year because basically each year is calculated in the calculations tab and we just put it here in a neatly packed table. What do we have? Fuel, summed fuel, EU ETS and FuelEU, and that is all taken from the calculations tab. And what do we add to this different output table? You can see we take the right cell in the calculations tab, we calculate the exchange rate or take the exchange rate applicable to that year. We multiply it with a Boolean that says whether or not fuel is applicable. That's the one that we saw in the output table just now. And then we also multiply it with whether or not it's included in the time frame that we have set for the analysis. So if we start in 2025 until 2040, then it calculates everything until 2040. And in this case, let's see, 2040 is still included. Afterwards, it seems to be excluded in this analysis. And that's how we get for each different item the right table with all the costs automatically. We do this for all the different items except of course fuel, that we simply sum. We have all total costs that we sum. We have cumulative that we sum. Same applies here, so these should be the same, and in this case that is correct. And then finally we also determine VLSFO equivalent cost if you need it. We do this for case 1 and case 2, as you can see, and that is it with regards to the output. So nothing fancy happening here. Most of the fancy stuff is actually happening in calculations. Let me show you. Luckily, I only have to show you one case for calculations. One of these, both of these boxes, they do exactly the same, but they take the input from the different cases. We do it, as I stated, for each year, which is, well, a lot of different cells, but all the calculations are simply the same. So let's zoom in a bit. We have everything inside EU, everything from into and the EU, and everything outside EU. We calculate energy used on board, including shore power. We calculate greenhouse gas intensity, including wind factors. We do a balance calculation, but that's could be applicable for pooling. Right now, that's not necessarily required. We do need it, of course, for the penalty costs. We also include the EUA price per year. That's included here. We can override it, but if you have a close look at what we use in terms of formulas, then you can see that we almost always use a VLOOKUP to have a look in that particular table, in this case the prices table, to look up the EUA pricing, and then of course the applicable year. So if you double click, then you can see that we, for each year, we look up that different price. And if we go to calculations, that we can expand, let's see here, there we can see that for all the different fuels, etc., it is all calculated here. And if we expand all of them, let's see, yep, there we go. Then you can see for each different type of voyage, we determine fuel consumption, we determine energy consumption, we determine LCV, there we have the lookup again, CO2 equivalent, etc., etc., and then finally the fuel price for that year. And like I said, we also need to divide with the exchange rate because all the calculations we perform in euros and all the input and output, almost all the input and output is in dollars. So that is how we calculate and sum everything here. Let's see, yeah, greenhouse gas intensity actual, that's added here, and then you can see that these are for the most part the most, well, it's not it's just adding and dividing and multiplying, but you can see that if we go to instructions and we scroll down to FuelEU, those would, I guess, be the most tricky calculations. Download the FuelEU guide if you need more help with making those calculations yourselves. Some small errors do occur, at least, well, not in the model that we have seen here, but in particular if you use older versions of Excel, that could lead to some errors because some formulas aren't used in older versions. That's basically it with regards to calculations. Honestly, we do the same for each year. Weight, fuel costs, all the same. We simply sum all the metric tons used, the energy used, and then we calculate the sub parts. It is a lot, but then again, if we, zoom out, then it's okay. Not too much. It's just let the spreadsheet do all the work. These are the most important calculations for the compliance cost calculator. Only EEXI and CI have some more calculations, and the rest is all database. So let me show you. EEXI could be considered the more simpler of the two. Basically what we have is the EEXI formula stated here. We calculate the general CO2 emissions, capacity, reference speed, and then we get the EEXI, and we use the table as per the regulations to determine the EEXI required. Of course, all these factors will change for specific ship types, voyage exemptions, etc. That is all not included. What we calculate here is an estimate of the EEXI based on the values that you provide. So again, the same applies to CII. Reach out if you need a more comprehensive calculation and or verification. So we do the same for CII, only CII includes a little bit more calculations, and we need to do it for case 1 and case 2. Both these cases need to have included all the different references to the values as per the regulation, and because there are so many differences between the different ship types, or ship categories I should say, this takes a little bit more effort. All the steps are included here. Have a look at the CII guide in order to get more information on the calculations specifically. Moving on to regulations data. Well, this is simply a database with an ID number, whether or not it applies, the regulation with a hyperlink, the impact on your vessel, organization status, when it comes in effect, the area to which it applies, the organizational type, and the applicable GT. And if you expand here, you can see that for each ship type we add a true or a false whether or not it applies, and we know in reality it can be even trickier than that. Always exemptions, always. But this is at least for us to give you a very quick estimate on whether or not all these different types of regulations apply. This is just a database, same as ship data. What do we have in terms of ship data? Most important information on each different aspect for all the different ships. The end row here, this is simply stated because we might want to add a few more columns. So this should be end column, in order to get you more information on particular ship types. For now, you're probably going to override this anyway, so this is simply to get you started. Fuel data, that's a little bit more important because, as you can see, a lot of information that can and will be changed over time. We took the liberty to include specific fuels, biofuels, RFNBOs, and fossil fuels, and these do not include many calculations except for, let's see, FuelEU well to tank calculations. For that, E value is very important, and of course LCV values. Apart from that, all the calculations are specified in the guide, and especially for fossil fuels, they are for the most part fixed. Have a look here to see where we take our information from, but I can tell you it is the guide itself. So in references you can have a look and download them. Prices, also a database, but what do we do for each year? We simply have a look at the previous year and multiply it with a trend factor that you can see here. So what we offer is either you input your own prices per year individually, or you take a base price, and this is the value I referred to in the beginning, the EU ETS price, and then you multiply it with a specific trend. And then if we do that here, let's see, 0, 5%, then we can see prices are going up, plus 5%. We can also do minus 5%, prices going down. Well, it's of course up to you how you want to do it. EU ETS could and will of course change very much. One of the things that we found out was that the exchange rate can also very much impact your analysis. So you can see whether or not it's wise to be either hedging or non-hedging on euros and dollars. I'm not an economy expert, but I know this has a big influence on the total costs. Moving on to decarbonization trajectory. Well, this is just a big table with, for each different regulation, an estimate on the carbon trajectory, which means that they have stated in their sustainability reports how much they aim to decarbonize until a specific time, and we just simply linearly interpolate between the values that they provide. That's it. These are estimates again, and give you an idea of if, for example, you are still sailing in 2040 or 2050, to what extent you have to decarbonize your operations in order to comply. And then finally, the few references that we have included or that we built this entire model on. It ain't much, but well, of course, looking at compliance, FuelEU and EU ETS, that is for the most part the biggest cost impact on compliance. And of course, CII and EXI could impact your design or what you do and how you operate, but to a much lesser regard as to FuelEU and EU ETS. Everything can be viewed here in these hyperlinks. And that concludes our Excel model. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. If you're still watching, well, you probably have to, otherwise you wouldn't be here. I just want to restate that we can always help you clarifying any questions that you might have. I gotta admit, I myself got really excited to work with the tool itself. I already have a few cases in mind that I want to explore in order to provide you more case studies on the compliance cost for different kinds of ships. That's enough about me. Contact us, contact the help desk if you need any clarifications at all, and I wish you a great day.